Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting Live. I am your host, Tracy Stuckrath, founder of the podcast and Thrive Meetings and Events. Actually in my home office this week, and glad to be home after 6 weeks of traveling to various parts across the country, which has been great to witness food and beverage in person and also to experience different labeling aspects and food safety. Um, and so I'm excited to be back in the office. And now this week on my show, I have got a woman who I was introduced by a marketing person. They're like, she's like, you two need to chat. And I'm so excited that she did because we've had wonderful conversations. So Francine Shaw, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
She is the founder and CEO of Savvy Food Safety, and two other companies that she's starting that I'll let her talk to you about. But she is an international speaker on various food safety topics and is an expert in multiple media outlets. So welcome, Francine.
Thank you, Tracy. So I've spent a long time in the food service industry. The majority of my life, I started as a child, 15 years old. At this point, we are a consulting company, but over the last couple of years, we've gotten involved a lot in digital, the development of digital products. COVID has kind of changed the way everybody is operating, and there's a demand now for digital products. So food safety and digital products are working very, very well together. And what we have been doing is one of the things that we're working on is a digital product that will track certifications. And there's a great need for the tracking of I'm going to use food manager certifications because that's industry-wide. That's what everybody knows. So what it'll do is it'll track the expiration dates, for example, of food manager certifications. And it'll send those notifications out 30, 60, 90 days, warning people that the notification is about to expire so that they don't get caught with a violation by the health department saying that, hey, your certification has expired, and then they're penalized for that. So that is one of a very watered down version of one of them. The other one is a very cool program that again, a very watered down version because it would take me an hour to explain it, that tracks traceability and transparency of products from farm to table. So it marries the supply chain with the restaurants and brings everything together in one program. And there's nothing like either one of these currently on the market. So I'm very excited about both of those.
Those sound fantastic. And we're going to jump in here real quick before we go anything. My friend LA just sent a comment. It says, quick hello from my cruise to Antarctica. Sorry, I can't listen in.
Wow.
I'm like, LA, we both want to be there with you. So have fun and no worries. You can catch up with us later. When I think both of those things are really, really important. Well, all three of the companies that you have are really, really important. The food safety consulting, the traceability of our food, because there's, more and more people want to know where their food is coming from. And when we see the news headlines, oh, these onions or these grapefruits have been recalled, being able to track that back, I think is really huge. And then also the certifications. And I know you mentioned just the food safety manager. I'm like, but it can track any certification, and that would be great for me in general. Just, okay, when am I supposed to renew this? Right? Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think today it's organic spinach. I think that's the latest outbreak is organic spinach. And it would be
really
to be able to track these items down in less than 2 weeks, figure out where they came from. Because in the meantime, people are continuing to eat the products and people are continuing to get sick. So, that to help as many of these situations as we possibly can and minimize the number of people that get sick or potentially die is the goal.
Well, and that, die and I use don't offend or kill people with the food that you serve them. There's so many aspects of it.
And I'm in business.
Exactly. And one study that I use a lot is from the IFIC, International Food Information Council. And one stat that I thought was really interesting is that more than 50% of Americans are concerned about foodborne illness. And that's what food safety is. I'm like, it's not COVID, which you can't get, if everybody remembers, you cannot get COVID from food itself. But they are worried about foodborne illness. And it's really important for all of us to understand, what food safety means.
Right. And, it's sometimes the perception is that depending on who you're speaking to, it's not a problem until it is a problem. And that's unfortunate. You know what I mean? It's not a problem until it is a problem. And it's, until it becomes personal, sometimes it's difficult for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think we take for granted seeing that A or that 95 or whatever it is on that restaurant. And I've been telling meeting planners, you need to ask your hotel partners and your catering partners what their health inspection score is, so that you have confidence in their food safety practices. And I think it's even more pertinent, coming out of COVID or wherever we are in this pandemic, to understand what those practices are.
Right. I agree.
And so, and I know you used to do in-person trainings a lot and you're doing consulting, but can you, well, and I guess that's really kind of a moot point, but in the consulting aspect of it, why should basic food safety be important to everyone?
I think it's important for people to realize that regardless of who you are, what your socioeconomic status is, what your ethnicity is, your gender, we're all susceptible to foodborne illness. It doesn't discriminate. It can be contracted at home, at social gatherings. It's not, just out in the public where, you can pick up foodborne illness. The number of people that don't think they can get a foodborne illness at home sometimes just flabbergasts me. You can pick this up at home. I mean, if you've seen, after a long time on the road, you travel, you put things in your refrigerator and you get home and you pull the lid off and it's like, oh my God, what is that? It happens. You can pick up a foodborne illness anywhere. And none of us want to be responsible for somebody getting sick or, God forbid, somebody dying. And, I often say to people when I am training, how long is your lunch meat good in the refrigerator when you bring it home from the deli? And the answer isn't until it gets that green slime on it, or that slime on it, or, it starts to smell funny. You can't taste foodborne illness. But the average person doesn't always realize these things. Sometimes even my own family does some crazy things. And I think I do for a living. But some of the discussions and arguments I have within my own family are sometimes just kind of crazy. But none of us want to be responsible for making somebody sick, like I said, or killing them. And it can happen.
Right.
So it's important to all of us. It should be important to all of us.
Well, and you just reminded me, and I didn't say this before we got online, but on my walk this morning, I'm like, oh, it's Thanksgiving next week. I should ask Francine this. And, we're coming up to making food for a whole bunch of people in our own homes. And do you have any quick, I know we're in the middle of this thing, but do you have quick tips on what we should think about when we're brining a turkey or doing any of that for Thanksgiving?
They were talking about this morning on our radio station. I was listening to it, and they were talking about how to thaw your turkey. Thaw it in the refrigerator or buy it fresh at the grocery store. Don't thaw it on the counter in the sink. And it made me think back to, over the years, some of the things that I've heard people say about thawing their turkey and what some of the most, I'm going to say, ridiculous things I have heard about how people thaw turkeys. I actually had somebody tell me one time they thawed their turkey in the dryer. And I had somebody else tell me one time that they wrapped theirs in an electric blanket. So, on the radio, they were saying, certainly everybody knows this. People know that you have to put it in the refrigerator to thaw it. And I'm thinking, don't assume anything ever. Do not assume that people people know this because they don't. And immediately my mind snapped back to being in this room with these adults, not children, these full-grown adults telling me, and this was before this is before we had those racks in the dryer, in the clothing dryer that you could put things on. I'm thinking, can you imagine a 20-pound turkey thumping around in the drum of your dryer? I can't take a pair of tennis shoes, let alone a turkey.
I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Can you imagine how bruised that thing was? So thaw your turkey in your refrigerator. Don't let it sit out. I can remember my mother stuffing hers the night before and leaving it set out almost, and getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and putting it in the oven. I can't believe I'm alive with some of the things my mother did.
Wow.
But, so that is certainly a huge thing. Being careful how long you let things sit out.
Mm-hmm.
My husband's grandma used to make dinner for the entire family, and everybody would show up at various times throughout the day, depending on what their schedules were with the other families and in-laws and things like that. And dinner would sit out on the table, or lunch, all day long.
Wow.
And sit there on the table all day long. And my husband, they've done this for years. And my husband would be like, why don't you ever eat? And I'm like, why I don't eat? Because, it's been sitting there all day, and I just, in good conscience with what I do, I can't eat after it's been sitting there all day.
No. Yeah, no.
Just can't. Those types of things, make sure you put it in a warmer, keep it warm,
Right.
I usually follow the food code recommendations, but to go above that, those temperatures is great. And that would be over 135 degrees for hot food, below 41 for cold food. The basic food safety rules are always, great to follow. Keep cold food cold, hot food hot, and wash your hands.
Right, exactly. And those are all the principles that were here before COVID. I mean, it's those standards that we have to adhere to.
Right.
And it's not just, and I sent this note to you, and like in my presentations that I give to meeting professionals across the board, is like, and it's everybody's responsibility. It's not just the chef in the back. I mean, once it gets put out front, on a buffet or whatever, it's the front of the house staff needs to understand that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The people, if there's a buffet, the people that are working in the buffet shouldn't be leaning over the buffet, talking to somebody under the buffet, to have conversation. Those shields are there for a reason. Nobody should ever be mixing food in the buffet, the old food with the new food. When you're being served food, thumbless serving should be happening. They shouldn't be putting their fingers on top of your plate or in your cups. All of those things, none of that should be occurring. Those are just basic principles, washing the tables off between guests.
Yeah, that's really, now everybody's going to start paying attention. Where's my thumb, right? Or, where's the server's thumb when they bring you the plate? And it's also, it reminds me of stories that I've heard that people with food allergies, they're like, they take it back and they just take the croutons off, right? And then bring it back. I'm like, that's not and I took the food manager certification. And if you're serving food, you should know that. But actually, do servers have to take those courses, or just the back of the house?
Okay, so one of the things that you and I had discussed is the person in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And what are they responsible for? So the person in charge is actually responsible for knowing and being able to manage the basic food code, what the food code recommends. What is important to know is that not all states adopt the food code. Okay, there's about 15 states that have adopted the most current food code.
Wow.
So that's the 2017 food code. Now, most of the states have adopted some form of the food code. I think there's one state, I believe, that's still operating on the 1995 food code.
What?
So most people are under the assumption that all states are operating on the current version of the food code. They aren't.
So how do we find that out?
FDA food code is a recommendation. It is not law.
It's not law. So
It's not. The state that I am in is not all the counties in this state require there to be a person in charge on staff. So
Francine, that blows my mind.
I know. I knew it was going to.
Oh my gosh.
Some of the counties in the state do.
Uh-huh.
Most of your national chains require, I thought you went away there because
I was like so flabbergasted that we're just ending this.
most of your national chains, because it's the responsible thing to do, make sure that there is a person in charge. I mean, it's their due diligence. They're making sure that they have that person in charge on every shift, because it's their due diligence. But that's not always the case.
Really?
No.
And I've been telling people, I mean, I just said it 2 days ago in Fort Wayne. I'm like, make sure that you ask who your food safety manager is, and
That's one.
well, okay, that's so planners, that's even more important for me to reiterate. When you're contracting and you're sourcing a hotel, ask the health inspection score and ask who the food safety manager is. And that's a big red flag right there, in my opinion, of not using that hotel. Mm-hmm.
Kind of like asking a bartender if they have a tip certification or
Right.
a certification. Is there a certification? Does that bartender hold one of those responsible alcohol management certifications,
Right.
which is another certification that app tracks, by the way.
Well,
but, because things are important. Have they been trained? And
right.
To your question, is everybody trained on the food allergen protocols? No, they're not.
Well,
And how in depth is the Surf Safe program? It's not.
No,
It's not. That should be its own separate training, because it's important. And some of those, some states only they don't even require the training. They require that you pass the exam.
Wow. So you can just take the exam without having gone through the training.
And some states and some counties within states will require like 16 hours of training before you take the exam. So, for example, I'm going to use Pennsylvania as an example. In some counties in Pennsylvania, you can just test out, just take the test and pass the exam. In some counties in Pennsylvania, you have to have 16 hours of education and then take the exam. And then in other counties in Pennsylvania, you might only need 8 hours of education and then take the exam. So is somebody that does what I do, which is we work with corporations to help them, get through this process. We're responsible when we're working with a corporation for knowing what those particular counties that they operate in, what are the requirements when their food managers are taking those exams, because they have to follow whatever the protocol is in those particular counties or states.
I mean, I'm just I'm just so befuddled, by that. And it's really kind of mind blowing. And then you think about I'm just thinking hotel wise, right? So you have a chain and then you have franchise owners, and those franchises are owned by you and managed by me. And so who's giving, kind of the mandate, which they're basically not, because it depends on where that
that's not necessarily true, because let's Chick-fil-A is going to have a corporate mandate. They're going to say, I don't care where you're operating, this is what the standard is.
Okay.
And that's what they do.
Okay.
You know,
All
this,
right.
I don't care what state you operate in. I don't care what county you operate in. I don't care what their protocol is.
Okay.
This is what ours is. And you're going to follow this.
Okay. That's awesome. But I think that probably based corporation per corporation then too.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, we need to go to something else because my mind is still just kind of blown.
That was a learning curve.
Right. Oh my gosh. So, I wanted to schedule you for this, this month, and because it's last week was corporate compliance and ethics week, which probably it doesn't fall under kind of food safety and everything, but it's just compliance and ethics. And I just think this is a good topic to fall under that based on what we were actually just talking
Right.
about as well. But it's the importance of compliance and ethics. And so how do you think, and when you're teaching companies, where that kind of mentality comes in? Or is it just basically, here's like, make sure you change your gloves and you change your cutting boards when you're using chicken versus vegetables and things like that? Do you see a correlation between those compliance and ethics and food safety?
I do. Yes. I think that every organization has, and I think that would probably, in my mind, fall under their food safety culture. I think that compliance and ethics would fall within their food safety culture, which is very important. And
Yep.
here, our industry talk a lot about food safety culture. Their supplier standards have to be within certain parameters, and what that means is they need to make sure that they're working with approved suppliers, and that means that their suppliers need to have the appropriate certifications. They can't just, you know, buy their bakery, their pies from Aunt Sally because Aunt Sally happens to make the best cherry pie they've eaten in their entire life, because she's not an approved supplier. Or years ago, there was an underground salami maker in Philadelphia that all these people were buying their supply from, and they were selling it. That's not an approved supplier. I was doing a health inspection, and I walked into a restaurant and they had literally just slaughtered a goat. That not did not come from an approved supplier. So
Uh-huh.
that's not ethical. So those types of things, they're not following the protocol, and those types of things aren't ethical. They have an obligation to make sure that they are serving food or buying food from suppliers that are going to keep the public safe and healthy. Because when you go in and you spend your money for that food, you're assuming that you're buying food that is not going to make you sick or again kill you.
Right.
So, I think that falls in with those parameters.
So,
It's important.
right. Oh, completely. And, and it's like, and I know because I used to live in Georgia, there's the cottage license. So you actually have to get approval to use your home kitchen, but you can't actually go sell that to a restaurant. You have to actually sell it to consumers in a farmer's market or other kinds of things, but not to not with a middleman food service provider in the middle.
Well, and that's another thing. If you're working in one of those farmers markets, and let's say you're selling baked goods, and you've got
Right.
the guy down the aisle that has eggs, and you ran out of eggs, you can't go use his eggs because you're out of eggs. And sometimes that happens.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it's convenient, and people don't do things sometimes intentionally.
Right.
Don't know that what they're doing is wrong. Most people truly try to do the right thing.
Right.
They oftentimes don't realize that what they're doing is wrong. Whether it's because they just haven't been taught.
Right.
There it is, just because, they've been raised differently. Maybe they, it can happen for a variety of reasons. And sometimes they just don't know what they're doing is wrong. And
Right.
there are those that will do whatever they can do to just,
Right. Okay.
get
So
away with it.
it brings to mind, food donations as well. So I was at an industry convention this past week, and we were talking about, being more sustainable and, making donations. And if it's been put out on the buffet, it cannot be donated to a food bank or whatever, because it's been out, and, it's been out for human consumption. But if it's been time and temperature controlled in the back of the house. But just this morning, I'm working with a client for an event in April, and I gave them a clause about we want to make sure that any excess food is donated. And the response to the hotel, and I'm going to just bring this back to food safety with you, is regarding the prepared food, we are not able to donate to any shelters for liability reasons. Fear that due to improper handling of food, once it leaves the hotel, someone may get sick or have an allergic reaction to the food and tie back to the hotel. Which you're covered if you're doing it time and temperature controlled in the back of the house, and you're managing it and you hand it off to them, with them also handling it the right way under the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, you can do it. But you can't do it if it's been out in the front of the house consumption. Is that correct?
But I think what your real question is, why won't they do it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, why won't they do? I mean, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act has been around, but that means you need to actually have viable partners that understand their also responsibility in the food safety of it.
And their concern is that if somebody mishandles it after they leave there, and another party may try to hold them accountable, and they don't want to take that risk. Their company has chosen not to take that risk.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because they can do it. They just have to find the right partners.
And their corporate attorneys have probably told them not to.
Which is, well, we won't get into that whole thing because the upper man, we won't get into that. That's a whole nother ball of wax, because I know that
I truly understand both sides, because we live in a very litigious society.
100%. Yes.
And I can see where if when it leaves their control, they have no idea how that food's going to be handled from the time it leaves their back door until it gets to point B. They have no idea how that food's going to be handled. And I understand what you're saying as well. I understand. But there is somebody out there that would still try to sue them.
And it just comes down to finding the right partners who are committed to this food safety. Right. And that's where
if they do it for one, they've now set that precedent.
Well, like the MGM Resorts has partnered with the food bank in Las Vegas, and they have a very tight relationship, but they went through, and talking last week, and actually I'll have that interview with the director of sustainability for MGM. I think it's next week it's coming on. But the thorough process that they vetted and how they're doing that entire process is really, really important. So it's not like you just can't go take the box lunches that have already been put out and just go give them out on the street, right? That is
down to education.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it can be done with companies that, know how to do it and want to help you do it, because otherwise it's food waste. Yeah.
And the fear, there's a lot of fear.
Right. Yeah. But I want to take the fear out of it. I mean, how do you do that? How can we take the fear out of it? I mean, I don't want to get sick from an onion or spinach or whatever, but and one chef last week at the show, same show, he just said it has to come from the heart. Right. And it has to come not from the litigious side of it. It has to come from, I want to do the right thing, which is the ethical thing, right? Is that asking too much?
Well, you have to find, and again, regardless of what we're talking about here, you have to find people that are fully vested. Oftentimes, it's people that are have been personally affected, people that have bought into whatever it is that the cause is. Whether it be, I mean, I am completely and totally vested in food safety. I'm very passionate about what I do. I believe in what I do. Um, there are certain times, depending on what it is we're talking about, I can become very emotional about, I think the one day we were talking, that might have happened. I know people who have lost children, because of somebody not doing what they should have done. I've talked to women who have lost babies, because they've gotten food poisoning. I know a man who lost his son, because of the Jack in the Box situation. So, it's just people that, you find people that are passionate about what they do, people that believe in what they do, and that want to be involved. And unfortunately, it's not everybody.
Okay, so on that note, I kind of want to take it a little bit to this twist of the question that you and I talked about before, is like, what are the most typical food safety violations? And, besides the thumb on the plate that you mentioned earlier, but I mean, are there things that we can look out for and we can ask questions about, from somebody ordering catering, but also, and then how can we also flip that, from a food service perspective, how can you train something different?
That
was
as consumers.
As consumers, what, or as meeting planners, what can we be on the lookout for? Well, actually, let's go back. Let's start with that one. What are the biggest typical food safety violations that you see?
Cleaning and sanitizing.
Okay.
Not cleaning and sanitizing properly. Oftentimes, things might get washed and rinsed, but they don't get sanitized. People don't understand the importance of sanitizing. If you have a food allergy, sanitation can be very important part of that process. People don't know that. It's not taught, so they don't know that.
And if you don't take the food handler certification, you don't know that for sure.
And even people that teach that oftentimes don't know that.
Wow.
It's pretty easy to get a certification to teach the food manager certification class.
Right.
I'm actually working on developing a program right now to train people to train the food manager certification class. I don't even know if I wanted to say that out loud. But I just did.
Yep.
So there we are.
So do you think, based on that sanitation thing, because of COVID and what's gone on, has it diminished, or because of service level issues that we're having, do you think it's going to be a bigger issue that we see that not being done well? Or do you think people are going to focus on it more because people are more paying attention to it?
Sanitation portion of it?
Yes. Or just,
it's probably been done better because of COVID, because there's been more emphasis on it. I think it's been being done better over the last 2 years.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Yeah.
Saying that.
Yeah.
Pests. Pests. And that's because people have a tendency to not want to get a pest control operator until they see the first mouse or the first cockroach. And the time to get one is before you see the first one.
Or when your customer sees it.
Yeah. So, if you have one cockroach, there are 7,000. If you see one, there's probably 10,000 that you're not seeing. And it's like, if you start out with 2 rats, you can have over 1 million in 18 months. So it's like the time to get that PCO is before you actually have a problem, and people like to save money. So they tend to not get a PCO and a pest control operator until they see the first cockroach or the first rat. The time to have that person is before that happens. And you can get them in a variety of ways. You know, they can come in people's pocketbooks and diaper bags. They can come in, if you tramp on a pregnant cockroach, the eggs can get in the tread of your shoes. So, you know, they can come in a variety of ways. This is way more than you bargained for.
But it's things that you want to know. But it also reminds me of the movie Ratatouille, which grosses me out because it is rats making the food. But it also, it's a cute Disney movie. I'm not discounting that, right? But how many family members does he have in the back of, in the back of that restaurant?
I had to, the book I'm writing, I talk about this. I had to do I did go in with a pest control operator one time because I was working in this town and there was a rat infestation under the city. And I had to go in with him because I had to talk to Borough Council about the fact that there was a rat infestation under the city. It is one of the worst experiences I've had. And then another bad experiences was when cockroaches were raining on my head. But that is one of the worst experiences that I have had was because you couldn't see, there was no light. So you could hear them and you could hear them scurrying like above. And it was like, what if one of them gets scared and they follow me? But I couldn't act like I was like, had any fear. And I'm thinking, oh my God, are they going to get scared and follow me? And I don't want one of them to slip. And
Wow. I don't want to be in that. Oh,
the ordeal. So pests, contamination, cross-contamination, moving from cutting board to cutting board or without washing, rinsing, and sanitizing, or product to product without washing, rinsing, and sanitizing the cutting board. So for example, from raw meat to raw vegetables and not washing, rinsing, and sanitizing the cutting board. And watch that at home too over Thanksgiving. You know, don't cut your meat up and then cut your raw vegetables that are going to be and not wash that cutting board. Don't wash your turkey. Do not wash your turkey.
Well, and I just posted a link to my interview with Ben from NC State. Oh my goodness, Ben Chapman, yes.
He's hysterical.
He's a hoot. So he was my second interview on the show last year. And he's doing a study for the USDA on chicken in the sink, and people wash the chicken, and he's like, and the germs just spread all over your refrigerator.
Splatter everywhere. It's like they're up in your faucet and they're everywhere. So when a water inspector comes to your house, your home, to test water, let's say they come to do a water test in your house, do you know where they get that water sample from?
No.
Your bathroom. And
what?
Do you know why? Because your kitchen faucet is the dirtiest faucet in your house.
What?
Yes. When is the last time you took the aerator off your kitchen sink and cleaned it?
I will be doing that when we hang up on this show.
People don't clean them.
Wow. Okay.
Before washing their meat, don't wash your meat. It splashes that bacteria all over the place, and it's like raining bacteria all over your kitchen. Don't wash your meat.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that you two know each other. He is funny.
Don't wash your meat. And people are still like, they're washing their meat. Don't do it.
Well, and a couple of weeks ago, I was at the La Dames conference in San Antonio, and one of the dames, I think she teaches food safety as well. I don't remember, but she was saying she teaches people different towels. Like a striped towel is for washing your hands, and a solid towel is for drying off your vegetables, and this other towel is for wiping down your counters. Like, so that you have different towels, because you also, and this is also thinking about your chefs, is like they're wiping their hands on their towel and they're doing something different without changing their gloves or sanitizing or whatever. I'm like, that's the same issue in your own home, but also at events.
So people think I'm crazy. Like at events, absolutely. Yeah. I don't even have towels at home.
You don't? What do you use?
Paper towel. The
Okay.
environmentalists are going to be sending you all kinds of.
Yeah, the zero waste chef. Yes.
Yeah, I don't. My ex mother-in-law used to get so upset with me because I had no hand towels because I don't dry dishes. Because and in restaurants, the reason you don't dry the dishes is because when you do, if they're sanitized, you're wiping that sanitizer away. So
Oh,
that's why you let them air dry. Not
okay.
only that, but if it's a dirty towel, you're introducing the bacteria onto the dish. So,
Right.
no, I air dry everything, and it's like, yeah, and if I
Okay.
like I use SOS pads.
Mm-hmm.
I do have some of those like green scrubby things, which I throw away regularly.
Uh-huh.
No sponges. No,
So
I
what do you wash your dishes with?
do not own a dish towel.
So do you just put all of your pots and pans in the dishwasher?
I don't have a dishwasher. My husband and I just bought a new farmhouse.
Uh-huh.
We're renovating it. And it came without a dishwasher.
Okay.
It will be a dishwasher. I currently do not have one.
Okay.
So
So if you don't use sponges,
I have a dishwasher. They had a sanitizing cycle. The full disclosure is right now I don't own a dishwasher.
and that's okay. Some people don't. But so what do you wash your dishes with then?
Again, paper towel. I will use a paper towel.
Wow. My friend Will is totally against sponges as well, because of the bacteria that collects in them.
They
Yes.
start to stink and they're nasty and they're
Okay, so food safety is down and dirty. I mean,
I could just stick my fingernail in my mouth. Somebody will email us about that.
okay, so food safety is down and dirty business. But we need to keep ourselves, our families safe. Um, besides not washing your turkey next week, what can and potentially getting rid of dish towels not for environmental reasons. But what are a couple of tips that you can give meeting planners when they're potentially hiring a caterer or a hotel or anybody that's hosting an event, for a food service provider?
So I want to talk about temperature abuse too. Back to the
Okay. Oh yeah, please.
washing, right? We did
Mhm.
talk about that. Temperature abuse. Temperature abuse is huge. People not keeping food at restaurants, whatever, not keeping food at the right temperature. Temperature abuse is absolutely huge. So for catering events, if they transport the food, you want to know how they transport it.
Mm-hmm.
How are they transporting it? Are they taking the temperature before it leaves the facility? And then again, when it gets to the facility,
Right.
what are the procedures for doing that? Do they have records for those procedures?
Mhm.
If they're probably going to tell you that they do that, but they
Right.
have the records for doing that. Do they have food safety plans? A lot of places don't have any type of food safety plans. They should, but a lot don't. Even professional organizations, a lot of them don't have food safety plans, and they really should have a food safety plan. Don't be afraid to ask them to see their health inspections. Like,
Okay.
don't be afraid to ask that. Especially if you're hiring them, you have the right to see their health inspections. You can ask them, who they use for their suppliers.
Okay.
So, those are all things that if you're going to hire their company,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be afraid to ask them that information.
Well, coming out of COVID, I hope they're a lot more open to providing that information. Actually, last week I gave a presentation and I'm standing on the stage and I'm like, food safety practices used to be behind the kitchen door, and and we're kicking the door down, and I just picked up my leg and kicked it down, because we need to know, we need to bring it out, because as I said earlier, 50% of people are concerned about it. More than 50% of people.
Food safety is becoming very consumer driven.
Yes.
At this point, it's becoming very consumer driven.
which is a good thing.
Mhm.
Yep.
Absolutely is.
Hold us accountable. Hold us accountable for sure. And as meeting professionals or as the catering partner, I mean, you have meeting planners, you're the ones that are communicating, you're the ones hiring those individuals to make the food for your attendees. So you're that go-between. And to me, even a hotel salesperson or a catering salesperson should know this information.
Well, and if you're the organizer, you're ultimately responsible.
Right.
So
Mhm.
that's your duty to make sure that the people you're hiring are safe.
Right.
They're doing what they should be doing.
Right. Okay. All right. So you could blow my mind, I think, for another hour as well about stories that you've experienced. So, what are 1 to 2 good resources that you have for people to access and think that they could help them as well?
Okay, so 2 really good resources are foodsafety.gov
Okay.
has a lot of good information on there, and fightback.org, fightbac.org. They,
Okay.
especially if you're working with children, they have a lot of fun games and activities and information like that. Food safety starts at a very young age. Teaching your children how to wash their
Mhm.
hands, the importance of keeping cold food cold, hot food hot, keeping the
Mhm.
counters clean, washing dishes properly. Those things happen at a very, very early age. And if children aren't taught that when they're young,
Mhm.
it's hard to instill that in an individual when they become older. So fightback.org and .org is an amazing organization.
Okay.
You're an educator or a parent to find fun activities to do with kids and adults.
Awesome.
And then foodsafety.gov, that is a lot of just basic, good, and solid information.
Okay. Awesome. And then besides those, how do they get a hold of you?
So our website is savvyfs.com.
Okay.
Our info is, our email is info at savvy, S-A-V as in Victor, V as in Victor, Y as in yellow, fs.com.
Okay.
So it's
Awesome.
savvyfs.com.
All right, awesome. And I'm going to put your social media handles up here too for people to follow you.
We have social media everywhere.
Okay, well that's awesome. Okay, so the final question that I love to ask everybody, well, actually, I'll let you choose. You can talk about what your favorite food and beverage is, or who would you really love to have over for dinner for a very safe but delicious dinner.
Dinner.
Okay.
Do they have to be currently living?
No, they do not. It could be anybody. Yes.
I would have to go with Jackie Onassis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think she was ahead of her time.
Mm-hmm.
I really think she was ahead of her time, and I've always been totally fascinated by her. So I think it would be her. Her and Princess Di both. I think they were
Yeah.
both very independent, very smart women.
Mm-hmm.
They were both a little bit ahead of their time.
That's awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate what you do so much, in so many different ways. And so I love the idea of the traceability. So I'm going to make sure I stay on top of that and watch that company grow. So thank you for what you do in educating organizations around the country about food safety. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
It was fun, and we need to do some other stuff together. I think it's awesome.
That would be fun.
Yeah. So everybody, thank you so much. This is Francine Shaw from Savvy Food Safety that you've been listening to and learning from about some gross but very important food safety practices. Thank you for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. We're live here every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. And on every Tuesday, a previous live show is published on the podcast platform. So make sure that you check out your favorite podcast platform for the Eating at a Meeting. Francine's will be dropped, I think next month sometime. So if you missed it live, you can listen to it as well. And until next time, stay safe and eat well. Oh, and actually one note, I will be live next week, the day before Thanksgiving, and to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. But I do also have a guest. So from Disability In. And so that'll be a great conversation to talk about disabilities in the different aspects. So until then, stay safe and eat well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.